You're listening to the Property Management Excellence Podcast for insights that drive rapid rental growth.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock, one of the directors at REB, also a co-founder of Managed. Excited to be back again to PMX, talking all things property management, not from a technical day-to-day perspective, but really looking at, I guess, opportunities in the industry, how the industry is evolving and shaping. It's my privilege to be able to bring on guests who know an awful lot more about property management than I do. My guest today is somebody I've known for a long time. He's been in the industry for several decades, and I got told off the last time I introduced my previous guest for saying that off air. But he has been in property management. He has senior roles, heading up property management for LJ Hooker, also other roles with LJ, founding and setting up another property management business, and more recently was headhunted and taken into a role heading up Wingman, which is an offshoring service that supports many in the industry. Nick Georges, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for making me feel and sound a lot older with that 2 decades of experience.
It's you kind of look at how many years you've been doing things, and suddenly when you get to my age at 58, you kind of look back and it's kind of a long and winding road. But there's value in experience, and I think it's also not that there are people coming into the industry, and one of the people that you work with very closely, Johnny Bell, he's young. I don't know, has he broken 30 yet?
He's not 30 yet.
And look, he's tearing up trees, and his story is phenomenal. But we're not here to talk about Johnny. So you've got an interesting mix of, and one of the reasons when I chat to you is you see new entrants that take this fresh look on property management, and there is such an archaic view across so many in the profession. Not everyone. There's plenty that have been around for a long time that are viewing the opportunities, but you get new entrants that are coming and tearing things up. You have been around a long time, and you've seen a lot over those 20 odd years.
Yeah, that's been one of the most rewarding things over the past 20 years for me personally, is being able to see the evolution not only of the real estate industry in general, but more specifically the PM side of the real estate sector. And it's funny, when you think about evolution, you think about the entire industry or the entire sector, but the real estate industry hasn't panned out like that. What I've found is over the last 20 years, but more specifically over the past 5 years, is that a lot of the more innovative and forward-thinking businesses have gone even further in front than the general sector. And it's unfortunate because, as you touched on before, there is a lot of legacy in what we do. There's an attitude of we've always done it this way. And unfortunately, what we're seeing over the past few years and will continue to happen is the gap widening between the more innovative businesses, the more innovative business owners, and the rest of the industry. And technology has had a big part to play in that. Young blood coming into the industry with fresh ideas has had a lot to do with that. And access to information. I think information is so readily available now, and ideas from different industries being implemented into our sector is only a good thing. And the best businesses and the best business owners are taking bits, implementing and seeing wins really, really quickly.
I think it's a really good observation. And what I've observed, and I'm an investor, I'm not from property management, but one of the things that I've observed is I'm seeing mortgage brokers. We've got a significant portfolio from the media business in and around mortgage broking. I'm seeing brokers coming in and setting up property management businesses and doing it fast. And I'm seeing accountants coming in. We're obviously seeing buyers agents start to come in. And then, you've got other people, like Johnny, who's just come in and seen the opportunity. And here's the thing, if you forget about the doing bit of property management and you look at the opportunity, you can build a really valuable, saleable asset. And then it's a very tangible way to grow a business. In many ways, it's simple. You can let the complexities disappear because you've got a customer or some customers, but it's the owner, really. If you don't have the owner, then you don't have a rent roll. And then you obviously have other stakeholders such as the tenants. But I think understanding the owner is so critical. And I think a lot of people pay lip service to it. But the reality is, I think a lot that work in property management don't understand owners. And owners come in all shapes and sizes. And a lot of them aren't particularly good as customers, right? They're not all this perfect cohort of lovely people. They're a pain in the backside. But here's the thing. If you don't understand who you're providing a service for and what exactly their expectations are to get out of it, how on earth are you going to win and succeed?
Absolutely. It's the old analogy of like, would you get a personal trainer that was out of shape? Would like a property managers in general, if you look at it, they don't understand the intimacy of an investor and the nuances with purchasing an investment and actually the information required to advise the investor if this is a good opportunity, this is a bad opportunity, and thinking like a real estate agent has got the industry to a certain level.
Yeah.
But if you want to advance, if you want to look at what are the next stages, all of the big businesses across Australia that we're working with and that you've seen have created ecosystems because you've got the investor who potentially bought from that office, but they also need a mortgage. They might need some advice from a property manager regarding another investment, or they might need some advice from a tradesperson. Or there's so many different avenues that you can go down once you've got the investor in your ecosystem. And unfortunately, as a whole, the average property manager just doesn't understand the level of detail that's required to actually advise an investor. And I remember sitting down at lunch with you a few weeks ago, and you gave me a case study that really resonated with me about one of your investment properties. The property manager actually brought to you an opportunity. I asked this question to all the listeners, like, are your property managers, like everyone talks about organic growth.
Yeah.
You've already got a pool of investors that are working with you. Why aren't you trying to build the portfolio like that?
4, Nick. I've bought 4 with my PM. 4.
Four
4 properties.
Yeah.
All of them in excess of 7% yield. And I've not paid a fee.
Yeah.
Because, and here's the thing, and this is the golden opportunity that is missed, is that the property manager is aligned with the owner. I'm an owner. I'm an investor. So I think like an owner and investor. But so few property managers actually grasp the opportunity. And it's not the fault of the individual, in my opinion, because it starts with the way that agency is set up. And if they're set up doing the doing and they don't really know why they're doing the doing, you can't expect PMs to suddenly become aligned and have, sophisticated conversations about yield with their owners or the importance of maintenance. And here's the thing, right? And I can tell you now as an owner, owners don't want to hear about maintenance. I got a notification just today from my property manager, another property manager saying I'm going to have to spend $4,500 on repairing a roof. We all have the same reaction, right? But here's the thing. If you've got the sophistication at the front end to have the conversation with the owner, aligning yourself with their objectives, you're going to be a partner with their investment property hopefully for a long time. Understand where they're going with it. What are your goals? Are you going to sell? Is yield important? Where does capital growth sit? But then you get in terms of maintenance, of course, you've got to maintain a property because you've got to provide a good standard of living for the tenants that rent, right? That's critical. But you talk to the owner and you say, look, I'm going to be the custodian of your investment property. I'm in a partnership with you. Hey, the better returns I get for you in terms of rental, the better we earn as an agency. But one of the things is to make sure that we safeguard your asset for long-term growth, properties need to be maintained. I will be the custodian of that. If I get that conversation from my PM, I go, well, this is fantastic. Of course I'm going to wince when I get a $4,500 bill, but I understand the bigger picture, right? So
I think we need to take a responsibility as owners of businesses and thought leaders in the industry have to take that line and shout that from the rooftops. I'm a huge industry person. I go to a lot of events. I support the industry, and one of the reasons why I joined forces with Wingman was to actually make an impact on the industry. But you go to events and it's always talking about the next product or someone to hype everyone up. Like I thought about this the other day. How cool would it be to actually have, if you're a real estate office, let's just say you're a real estate office in the Lower North Shore of Sydney, which is where I grew up. So I just picked that. And you got one of your biggest landlords to come in and talk to the property management team about the experience, how they became an investor, how they've built their portfolio, giving the property managers a deeper level of understanding of the mindset of an investor, I think that is more beneficial than going through a process of a routine inspection.
Yeah.
We've got a real estate business that we're involved with up in Johnny's business up in Brisbane, and we often get tradespeople speak to the property managers and take them on site and talk to them about like the nuances of a hot water system or an electrical box, just to give them like a base level understanding of when a tenant calls up or a landlord's asking him a question. They might not be able to answer it, but they'll have a vague understanding. As I said, I think it's our responsibility as leaders in the industry to educate. And with information so readily available, we can get creative with educating our property management professionals on what it is to be an investor and a deeper understanding of what an investment property is, not just rent collection and facilitating maintenance.
You're so right. And I think it's a two-way street. You're absolutely right that investors can help educate property managers. But once you get the connection, it's a two-way street. Property managers and custodians of multiple rental properties have so much that they can deliver in terms of value to the investor. And my situation is, I was going to buy a property, and I decided I'd do it on my own. I wasn't going to use a buyer's agent. I used buyer's agent lots of times, and I begrudged spending the money. And I thought, I know what I'm doing now, So I found a property. I did it all online. I negotiated with the sales agent, and on face value, I wanted yield. And I went to my PM and I said, I'm going to put this with you on your rent roll. I'd only got one with them at the time. And I asked them the question. I said, what do you think? And my PM had the confidence to take that permission to tell me what he thought. And he said, well, it's in a bad location. It was in Carlton. He goes, it's in Carlton by postcode, but not really Carlton. And then he asked me a question. He said, what is it that you want? And I then picked the phone up and I said, look, I'm looking for yield. He goes, well, I'll show you where you'll get 7% yield. We've got one on our rent roll right now. Bang, and I bought it, And it was a one bedder, not a two bedder, but I didn't care because yield is what I wanted. And then I've now with that agency. So I'll just dally on them for a second. This is an agency where sales and property management they are connected. So of course, my first relationship with the sales agent was when he said, oh, look, we've got this one on our rent roll. It's going to be sold. So then I speak to the sales agent. Sales agent intimately, I say is the selling principle, intimately understood the value of his rent roll, understood the value of working with me and keeping that on the rent roll, and was excellent and professional and an honest and decent fella in the first place. I've then gone on and I went and met him and I bought the property. And I said, look, he said, hey, if you want to buy, in Brunswick, I'll help you find properties that I'm not selling, that other agents are selling, where I know the building, I know the yield, I know there's no cladding issues. So I'm looking at so without going too far down that path, there is property management, property managers and agencies with the right mindset. There is this massive unlocked potential that can be brought to the fore. But here's the thing, right? You've got to have the professionalism within the organization to give the value to the owner. There's a big thing.
There's one thing, if you want to supercharge growth in your business, the best agencies are on that path, but bridging that gap that you mentioned between sales and property management is one way to supercharge your growth. And that all comes back to a certain level of service. Our business, our industry is based around relationships. So the relationship between the property manager and the salesperson, and actually delivering a quality service to their clients.
Yeah,
it blows my mind how many sales agents that work in a real estate office are referring outside of that office, and that is think about all the setup costs of a business, the time put into recruitment, the time put into training, and right under a director's nose, business is going elsewhere. I don't blame the sales agent for that. I actually blame the organisation because that sales agent has felt the need to refer outside.
Yeah.
And I think that's a conversation that needs to be had, and a conversation that needs to be really talked about inside an office, and that will assist property managers with rent roll growth, business owners with rent roll growth, and also the understanding of the investor journey, because a lot of those investors that come in have been through multiple open homes. They've missed out on properties.
Yeah.
But if you're a property manager building those relationships off the back of those person intros, it's only a good thing when they end up buying an investment property, because you've started to build that relationship already.
Yeah, there's a disconnection.
Yeah.
Look, we'll take a quick break in a couple of minutes, and I'd like to sort of dig a little bit deeper into this, but I think that there is a disconnection between what the value is that property management organisations have and what the realisation is from the investor. But I think also, but just back to your point, I think sometimes the cultural change is too hard. You've got businesses that have been set up the wrong way, and this is not the fault of the employees. It has been the way that they've been a bit of an afterthought as, sort of a secondary sort of business supplement to a sales office. And it gets very difficult to change that mindset if the principal doesn't see the value. But there's really what I'd refer to as a next gen agency emerging. I'm seeing them emerging all the time. I'm seeing them coming in from different angles. I'm seeing them coming from within the industry, and some of them are pretty big, and they're growing organically, and they're acquiring because they put property management at the fore, not in the background.
Yeah.
We'll take a break there. Back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. Great to have you with us, PMX. I've got Nick Georges with me. Nick, I'd like to just dip into some of your, I think there's going to be some insights that you can share with our audience around really looking at sort of how you can leverage outside of your team for growth. So look, this area that you operate in terms of Wingman, you've obviously got many clients in many different areas. What are some of the key, if you can give us some of your key observations about some real wins through smart resourcing?
You talked about earlier the next gen or the next wave of people coming into the industry and giving it a red hot crack, and disruptors, if you like, and thinking differently and doing things differently. And I think that's only a positive for our industry. Some of the stuff is really out there, but some of the stuff is really, really basic that these so-called disruptors are actually implementing in their business. And I can speak from first-hand experience with Housemark, a business that I work with on a daily basis, and really simple pillars and anchors to the business are about communication with the landlord, right? The current pool of landlord and resourcing your property managers to actually be able to have the time. Can you
just give us a sense of scale?
Yeah.
Because not everyone's going to be familiar with the brand.
Yeah.
So people know exactly the kind of scale of the business you're talking about.
So Housemark sits at about 3,500 properties under management.
Yeah.
Grown organically in 6 years, and no acquisitions, and netting 100 a month consistently over the past 7 or 8 months. Crazy growth in any realm. But in terms of, so one is actually resourcing your staff here in Australia to give them the time to spend with the landlord. So our property managers on average looking after between 250 and 300 properties each.
Yep.
With an executive assistant in the Philippines through Wingman. But their only KPI is to speak to the landlord once a month. And
I have, so apart from the PM, one of my PMs that I'm with now, who I've bought my first properties in the late 90s. I would never get a phone call, never. So that's mind blowing as an investor.
It's really hard to lose a management when you're speaking to your client, or not even a management. It's really hard to lose business in any sector if you're speaking to your client a minimum of 12 times a year.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking speaking to the client.
Yeah.
So if you look at the property management space in specifically, 12 touch points, there might be a relet where you'll speak to them another 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
There might be a repair where you would talk to them a couple of times. So you're speaking to your landlord 20, 25 times
It's a relationship.
Year. It's no longer do you get the phone call, what the hell's going on I haven't heard from someone. It's a different conversation. It's a relationship-based conversation. It's a professional conversation where, Alex, I got an email about my hot water system. What are the next stages? It's a very different conversation. And
it's a proactive conversation rather than reactive.
Exactly. And it's amazing that people always ask you, what do you talk about? Like, something's relevant. There's always maybe a maintenance. There's a possible rent increase. There's a routine inspection coming up. There's a couple of investment properties that the salespeople have listed that have great returns. There's an interest rate rise that we've just had. Like, there's always something to talk about.
You can talk about the local market. Look, I know that not every owner is necessarily an investor. You have some people that are maybe, their house is being let out and they don't see themselves being invested, but the most are, to one degree or another. And when you're managing an asset, which is what you're doing as a property manager, that's really what you're doing. No, you're not fixing things. Of course you have to do that, but that's not what you're there to do. There are multiple conversations about vacancy rates in the area, new properties that are coming on, any new developments that are taking place, how it impacts their investment. So there's plenty to talk about 12 times a year.
Yeah. I think it's also really interesting that you use the word asset manager, because the term property manager and asset manager sound and feel different.
Yeah.
And as an industry, I feel like the word asset is something that we really need to resonate towards and stop thinking of yourself as you're just managing the property, because I've been thinking about this, and so asset manager alone, unfortunately, is in the realms of wealth management. It's a structural term. So, but there is, I don't like the term property manager. It's got a negative connotation, and that's nothing to do with what people do. But investors, here's the truth: investors don't understand what you do, and you can play a violin, but they don't understand what you do, and they don't care what you do. So the opportunity is to educate them. And so, whether you're a property asset manager or a property investment manager or an investment property manager, I think it's probably a 3-letter multiple to give context. An asset manager, unfortunately, in isolation, doesn't say what you do. But you're absolutely right. There needs to be a new narrative. Yeah, new narrative, and also the word relationship, because that relationship manager piece of the role, in my opinion, is the most important part of the process. That property manager that you spoke about that brought forward that investment property, or that questioned you on the investment that you put forward, wouldn't have done that if you didn't have a relationship with her or him. And
if I didn't ask, I asked.
Yeah. But you could have asked. If you didn't have a relationship, she could have said, yeah, it's fine, or dismissed her. But she was comfortable enough, because you'd been working with her for X amount of years, that she said, no, Alex, I think if you want, what do you want? If you want yield, you need to go here. And that piece is a shift that we always talk about. Like, I always say this, and I've been talking to a number of people in the industry. The old stepping stone of property management into sales. I actually don't think that there is a better time to be in property management. There is a huge opportunity. There is an amazing emergence of great tech and great information and great training.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing some amazing stuff in the PM sector to actually put it up in lights. So if ever you wanted to actually build a career in property management, now is the time. And there is opportunity everywhere to come into a business or a brand or do something on your own and make an impact.
And you're absolutely right. And people within the industry are seeing it, but people increasingly outside the industry are seeing it, because it's not rocket science. You look at the ability to build value through constructing a rent roll, and then you look at the simple structure that enables you to do that. So you have properties and you've got owners and tenants. It isn't that complicated, and you're getting people who understand the value of building an asset that also gives you an income and then is saleable at the end, and they're coming in, they're doing it very effectively. We've seen one of the biggest, there's a very, very significant property manager now operating in regional Queensland that's gone. He was an accountant. So he was an accountant, he understood property investment, and then so he'd been a customer of property manager, and he did the math. And he's now got, he's got, probably 900 properties under management. And he's done some through acquisition. But again, he understands the metrics of what I spend, how quickly I pay it back, when I get my investment back. There are plenty of people coming in, but you can still do it from within, right? If you've got the right attitude. And property management is, I think if you are the principal and you have the right focus on that side of the business and give it the love that it deserves, it's a very, very, very good. You're you are a custodian of investment property, and you're responsible for, and in some cases, many millions of transactions and assets for your customers. It's a very responsible and very rewarding role if structured the right way.
There's also a lot of opportunities to create an ecosystem within the business.
Yeah.
You talk about if you've got 200 managements, you've probably got 160, maybe 180 landlords. They all need mortgage brokers.
Yeah.
They all need building and pest inspections. There's an ecosystem that you can actually build around your rent roll and people that are actually doing business with you every day, and add value to them and their networks. There's not many industries where you can actually build an ecosystem of businesses, and I'm not talking about starting 6 businesses within your real estate office.
It's just adding new revenue streams.
Yeah, it's just different revenue streams that are done well, can add huge amounts of value from a growth perspective, but also to the client.
I think also something you touched on earlier is, this is the 12 conversations a year, 1 a month. The number of referrals you're going to get from that, because investors talk to other investors, right? If you've got, there are a few people who've got one investment, people like to talk about it, and if you've got somebody with more than one property, they know other people who have properties, and you're going to get referrals in. If you're doing a great job, and if you're having a different conversation with your owners, guess what they're going to do?
Yeah. It's always the talk of every barbecue. There's always some real estate chat. And if your name is being thrown around at the local barbecue, you will get referrals, and you will be spoken about in a very positive light if you're making minimum 12 connections a year to your landlord, and bringing forward investments to them. It would be very rare that any property managers would be, even if it's not the right one for them, the sentiment around actually bringing forward an opportunity will sit well with anyone.
We're going to need to wrap up fairly soon, Nick, but there's a couple of things that have happened recently that I'd just like to sort of throw out. So one of the things, there's been a change in rates, and it's looking like we've got a change in direction. Who's better positioned than the PM to have that conversation? But I wonder how many PMs actually deliver that news or have the conversation. I'm sure some people tuning in do and are nodding their heads, but I don't think I've ever once had a rate notification from my PM. But this is directly linked with your yield, and I think like an investor, because I am an investor. So my rates go up. Well, guess what? Now there's a disconnect between my rental income and my mortgage repayment. So now that's stress and tension for me. If I've got a large portfolio, that's amplified. Having a conversation around rate increases, you're not going to up the rent there and then, but it's to have the conversation. Yeah. We've also got proposed changes around CGT. Be the owner and the custodian. You have a position where you can educate and at least communicate with your owners on a higher level than just maintenance. And
it's interesting because they go on it. You touched on maintenance there and rate rises. It's a conversation to the landlord around, say for example, the landlord had 3 investment properties and there was a rate increase like we've just had recently, and you rung on the front foot, obviously mentioned to them, I'm sure you saw the rating, the recent increase in rates, and just started to have a conversation. Your property at 1 Smith Street is probably due for new washing machine and a fresh lick of paint.
Yeah.
If we did that at the end of this tenancy in 3 or 4 months, we could potentially get you another $50 a week.
Yeah.
That's going to flip the conversation from, oh crap, well, I've got a increase in my rates to I could potentially get another $50 a week in a few months' time. It flips it from a negative to a positive, and you're being a proactive property manager and you're adding value and you're taking a front foot approach.
And you can enhance that further with having some education on depreciation. And I don't know how many PMs can talk about depreciation, but here's the opportunity. You've got, honestly, you've got some sophisticated landlords and owners, but most of them aren't.
Yeah.
And they're on this journey. They've maybe gone through, maybe a family member has persuade them to, or they've decided they want to go into property investment, or maybe a buyer's agent has got them down the journey. But I can tell you, investors, particularly the first or second time in, they're nervous. It's a really, because you don't realize your investment until 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the path. And I know the first time I bought, I was excited about it, but I was nervous because I'd bought the property and then I'm going, have I done the right thing? What better than a property manager to be your ally, your partner in your investment journey? It is so valuable, and you're spot on. You can then be a conduit for other services. Hey, you know what? You may help them as they decide to go on their journey, as I have done late on, albeit, to say, look, there are other properties on our rent roll, or there's other properties in our area, because guess what? We're aligned. It's not a tick and flick thing.
Yeah.
Sales, you have a very transient relationship with your vendor and your buyer, right? It's done. A buyer's agent, transient. Property manager is permanent.
Yeah, it's a relationship, and in any relationship, it's always got to be a give and take. And investors buying a property and handing it over to the property manager to collect rent and facilitate maintenance is archaic property management. And property managers coming to their landlords now proactively with opportunities, with information, with energy, and with a general want to actually add value is the future of property management. And I think that's something that business leaders need to adopt. Business leaders need to embrace and prop up their property management businesses to get to the next level.
And if you don't, guess what? The new entrants they're going to take those managements off you.
Yeah.
Nick, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
We didn't even get a chance to talk about pickleball either.
No, that's all right. We can leave that for episode 2.
Nick, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. For everyone else, we're really grateful for you tuning in. I personally love the privilege of being able to talk to you. I guess about property management from the perspective of an investor. I'm really looking forward to bringing on other guests like Nick who can help just shed some light on where the opportunities lie. Show where excellence lies, and hopefully lead to a better and more productive property management industry. Thanks for tuning in.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.